we're not really self-aware. It's one thing to talk about awareness, but I remember one time someone asked me, "What are your strengths?" And I was like, "I don't know what my strengths are."
Yeah.
I struggle to find my strengths, but I could point out my weaknesses for you. So how do we get to that point of self-awareness? Are there steps that we need to take to become more self-aware?
Yeah. I think it's complicated because it really is an individual experience, and some people are more self-aware than others. So they're more aware of. I mean, I don't know. I mean, and I'm not. What I'm going to say, I'm not sure if it's going to make it justice. Which is, we talk about emotional intelligence. So there's different types of intelligence, and emotional intelligence is one type. And some people are more emotionally intelligent than others. And from my experience, people who are more emotionally intelligent tend to be more self-aware.
Hello and welcome back to A Reformed Mindset. My name is Juliet, and just in case you're new here, I'm the founder of A Reformed Mindset. And with me here today, I've got a really amazing guest, and that is no other than Dr. Gisele Fernandes. Really lovely to have you here today, Dr. Gisele.
Thank you, Juliet. It's really lovely to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm so honored to have you here. So, Dr. Gisele is a clinical psychologist with expertise in self worth and self acceptance. So, today we're going to be exploring a topic that is really dear to my heart, and that is the role of self worth and self acceptance in building a woman's future. Are you really ready to hear what we have to share? So, let's dive right in, Dr. Gisele. I would love to hear from you. What was the motivation or the inspiration behind you going to study clinical psychology with focus on self-worth and self-acceptance?
So lots of people, experience problems with their sense of self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem. So this is something that is quite common. It's not, just a small proportion of people that have that problem. And so the story about how I went to clinical psychology is one thing, and the story of focusing on self-esteem and self-worth in professionals is something else. So going into clinical psychology for me was at the end of secondary school. There was a subject which was philosophy, which I really liked, and made me think about how interesting people are, and how much I wanted to find out more about them. And then so I was interested in psychology, and then it became clinical psychology because there's different areas of psychology. So when I did my degree, my first degree was psychology, and there's different avenues you can explore, and I thought that I really liked the mental health part of it, and so clinical psychology is an option that you can follow, so I follow that. And then in terms of confidence and self-esteem and self-worth, as I said, it's such a common issue that people experience, and when you don't have enough of it, it can create a lot of problems. So I niche down into professionals that have issues with their sense of self-worth. So they really struggle with liking themselves. And I decided to focus on them because these are amazing people. They have so many qualities, so many strengths, so many skills, but they don't believe in themselves. And so that imbalance creates so much suffering, so many problems, including mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and other problems, things like eating disorders. And so I'm really amazed by this client group. They really inspired me to be better myself. I'm constantly learning with them, and I want to be like them. So it's about I decided to follow that particular avenue because I wanted to be of service to this client group.
That's very lovely to hear. But there was a point you made when you said self-worth, self-acceptance, like it's a common issue that people face. I would love to hear from you. Why do you think that is, why is it common? Do you think it has something to do with nature, nurture, culture, and the environment, or we're just born with it? Either you love yourself or you hate yourself. So I would love to get more perspective on that.
On this, yeah. So it's all of the things you said. So it's not just the one thing. So our understanding is that your sense of self comes from your temperament and your early life experiences. And so, in terms of temperament, there might be some people that, I don't know, perhaps are more positive, for example, and others may not be like so much like that. But from my experience, what really plays an immense role in our sense of self is our early life experiences. So the way, our parents treat us, the way, the community treat us, the way that society views us, that has a significant impact on, our sense of identity, sense of self-worth, and sense of confidence.
Do you think, because in some parts of the world, you hear maybe like caregivers or parents, they're using very negative words on their kids. Maybe the child is coming back home and the child is not really having good academic grades, for instance, and they start telling you, oh, you're not good enough, you're not clever. That's already instilling a mindset in you. Do you think that parents or caregivers, there should be an awareness for them to know that those words they are saying to children, it has like a much more greater impact on them than they realize?
Yes, I mean, our caregivers are, the most important people for us.
Mm,
And yes, kind of awareness is really, really important. But it's really difficult, isn't it, when, parents themselves may have had difficult childhoods, may have, as adults faced difficulties. Like, for example, I mean, this is a specific example, but you come to a different country, you have to learn everything. You might be facing, I don't know, financial problems,
yeah.
and that all of those things have an impact on us. And if we are parents, that can, kind of translate into stress and perhaps not having as much patience, with our children. um so yes, awareness is really important, but it's not necessarily easy, to be aware of these
Yeah.
things.
I think when I was growing up, I faced that, but that was not with my family. It was with my peers at school.
Yeah.
So because growing up, I had like diastema, gap tooth, and I had people try to bully me like, "Oh my gosh, you've got gap tooth." They saw it like it was a taboo, for
Mm,
instance. And
mm,
I grew up, I became so cautious of it. I felt like I don't like my gap tooth because of my gap tooth. I'm
mm,
not good enough. You barely see me smiling in pictures because it became like an insecurity. And this was something that I adopted as a child from
mm,
my classmates growing up. Now, for a woman who she's at that point in her life, maybe one of our listeners out there, growing up, you were probably bullied, probably not by family, friends, like I said, maybe someone has said to you, you're so fat. And they feel very
mm,
insecure. And because of that, they feel, I'm not valuable. I'm not good enough.
mm,
How would that woman, what steps does she need to take for her to be able to accept herself the way she is?
mm. So I mean, if the problem is quite significant, it's so difficult to have a more balanced sense of self. I would definitely recommend people to go for therapy, because it's you have someone who is independent from you and from your environment, that can, kind of really help you to think about how your life experiences have shaped you, and have create your life experiences have created this narrative about you that you did not have a hand on. You did not have any impact in creating that life story. And so when you see a therapist, one of the things that they can help you with is to restore your story by bringing into your awareness some of the things that perhaps you never thought about yourself,
Mm,
like your strengths and your qualities. And even that awareness that the story that you carry with you wasn't created by you, was created by your experiences with other people.
yeah.
So I would definitely would recommend, if it's quite a significant issue, that you go and see a professional.
Mm.
Other ways, if you don't see a professional and your problem is, kind of mild, I really think that it's important to focus on your qualities and your strengths, your skills. And I know that, there's that concept of toxic positivity. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a balanced view of yourself, because nobody has just bad things about them, isn't it?
Mm.
We have a combination of things, strengths as well as things that perhaps we're not so good, at.
Weaknesses.
Yeah. So being, kind of collecting the evidence for the things that you're good at, collecting the evidence for your strengths, and your
Yeah.
skills. And, sometimes, and that's not something we may not think about it, but it's not very difficult to collect. I mean, in everyday life, you will be doing so many things that talk about your strengths and your qualities and your skills. I don't know. When I came here today, you were already here, Juliet. So you were ready. You were right. You were on time. So that tells me that you're motivated. You're um, punctual. Just in doing this, it tells me already lots of things about your qualities and your skills. So in everyday life, we enact, the things that we're good at. Of course, yeah, the things that perhaps we're not so good at will happen as well. But to develop a good sense of yourself and a strong sense of who you are, and good self-esteem, we also have to recognize, the things that we're good at in everyday life.
Yeah, I love the fact that you talked about therapy. Now, I'll share from my own personal experience. There was a phase in my life where I was going through really tough time. I had almost gone through like an emotional breakdown, and I had to go for therapy for 6 months. Now, during that period of therapy, I felt like, yeah, I'm the strongest girl alive. Everything was good. My self-esteem, everything was so healthy. And immediately after the therapy, I relapsed. So the
Yeah.
same things my therapist told me, don't do this anymore. Like, things I came to him talking about, because my therapist at the time was a man. And I told him, okay, this was what was affecting me. And he was like, okay, probably you shouldn't do this. Immediately after the therapy, after a couple of weeks, I relapsed. I went back to that same thing that
Yeah.
was causing the issue. Now, do you think for your clients, for instance, they come to you, they speak to you about what they have, and, they go through that phase of therapy. How would you, how would you advise them to, or what's the best practice for them not to relapse
Mm,
and not
mm,
go back to that, phase anymore? Because I don't know if that is something that has to do with our mindset.
mm,
Maybe you have that fixed mindset and you need a mindset reformation, or there are ways you can actually ensure that they do not relapse.
mm. I might disappoint you with this, Juliet, which is, it's not possible for people not to relapse at some level. From my experience, and I supervise other therapists as well, so I see that. So it's not like it's my clients, right? So in other, with other clients, other therapists as well, relapse is part of the process, because that way of coping, that way of I don't know, seeing things it's a habit. It becomes a habit, and it has been with people for so long, often, that, 6 months of therapy, if you think about it, it's not that much. I remember working with someone, in the NHS. I think we had 20 sessions. She had 20 sessions of therapy with me. And in the last session, she said something that I never thought about that in that way. She said, I've been seeing you for these many months, but actually the amount of therapy that I've had doesn't even amount to a day. And if you think about, if you see someone for about an hour for 20 sessions, that's 20 hours. That's less than a day
Mm,
of therapy. So it's perhaps unrealistic to expect that you're going to completely change, with 6 months of therapy. But it puts you on a path. And so I don't see relapse as a problem. I think, people often relapse. I see it as it's part of the process. And when, you do relapse, it's an opportunity to look at, okay, what is it that I have to work a little bit more on? So it could be that, because these can be ingrained patterns, they can be habitual. So you sort of gone back to a habit. And it's, some of these things are ways of coping, and so, you're comfortable with them. They work for you in the short term. They don't work in the long term, some of these coping mechanisms. So when someone comes for therapy again, it's an opportunity to think about, okay, what is it that led to the relapse, but also to think about, what is it that we need to work on a little bit more, rather
Mm.
than. And I was having this conversation really recently with a few clients, around, not seeing it as, you're back to square one, but to seeing it, okay, you still have things that you've taken on from therapy or other things that you've been doing, but to see it as, okay, there's something else that I need to do, or I need to do a bit more of. Let's think about this. And often people, if they see it in that way, it's just a continuation of that work that, they came for. um, and so it's sort of, part of the process of progressing to the goals, that they have.
That makes a lot of sense anyway, because when I did have that episode of, relapsing, I felt like I just wasted my time going for therapy.
Yeah,
That was how I felt then. And I,
yeah,
that's story for another day. But I'd love to understand from you. I know you've got over 20 years of experience in clinical psychology. Is there a common trait you find amongst your clients that you feel like this is probably one of the most predominant cause of low self-worth, low self-acceptance?
definitely. There's negative thinking is a really, really common.
I think I should stand in
Yeah.
front.
It's a very common process. And, there's different kinds of negative thoughts. There's things like worry, and worry is something that's very normal for human beings. Worry is a process that tells us that there is a problem, and so we should be paying attention. But worry, excessive worry causes anxiety,
Yeah.
causes, problems with our behaviors, for example. So we might, so worry is a thinking process. So we're really, it's thinking negatively about the future. So one of the formats of worry, the main format, is what if, something bad happens, or what if something good doesn't happen. And it can be about a lot of the clients I see will have what we call hypothetical worry. A hypothetical worry is a worry that's not happening right now, but the person is thinking, what if this happens, in the future. The thing is, that kind of worry may never happen, but people are spending so much time thinking about
I
that.
think I'm that client.
Yes, yeah. So we make a distinction in therapy between realistic worry and hypothetical worry.
Mm,
Realistic worry is, a problem is happening right now, and so you need to problem solve. But you cannot problem solve future worries, because they're not happening right here, right now, and they may never happen. Um, so worry is a very common, negative, pattern of thinking. If it's kind of chronic, happening all the time. Another kind of negative thinking is rumination, and rumination is, there's positive rumination, but negative rumination is thinking negatively about the past, and thinking about the past and focusing on the negative things that, have happened.
happened.
Um, so those thinking patterns are really common in people that come to see me with self-esteem and self-worth issues. And worry, like chronic worry, will lead to anxiety problems, whereas rumination, negative rumination, will lead to low mood, will lead to low mood and depression.
I think I've probably experienced everything you've talked about in the past because um I had a traumatic experience growing up. I lost my dad at a very tender age, and based on all the circumstances that happened around the time, I became a very pessimistic individual. So I rather
Yeah.
hope for the worst to happen and the best happens than expecting, being optimistic, and
Mm.
things go wrong. And it actually affected me growing up,
Yeah.
into adulthood because I'm overthinking things.
Mm.
Like I had a friend that would tell me, you can't control like things that are out of your control. You shouldn't worry about it. But I I'm always worried.
Mm.
I've gotten like really bad. At the time I had like very bad anxiety. Like
Anxiety.
I'm doing things, I'm not processing my emotions. I'm Because of that anxiety, I'm like I'm just reacting, you know. And I know that there are quite maybe a number of young women out there who, they're in this phase in their life where they are having this negative thoughts, negative emotions. You called it hypothetical worry. Now, what's the best approach? Because when you think like this, it makes you very anxious of the future, for
Mm.
instance. With a woman, maybe you've seen a job opportunity and that negative worrying is coming in. It's like, you tried, you fail, you're not good enough. And it holds her back, and she's not really able to like explore her full potential. So, how would you advise that woman to, go from being a pessimistic individual to
Mm.
becoming an optimistic individual?
Yeah. I think awareness is the first thing. Without awareness, we can't do anything, isn't it? We can't resolve that issue if we're not aware
Mm,
that, okay, this is what I'm doing, and this causes me difficulties, causes me problems. So definitely awareness, I would say it's the first thing. And for your listeners, what I would like to say is that worry is something that you can reduce. You can um really address worry and reduce it. I used to be someone who worried a lot,
mm.
many decades ago. And now I'm not saying that I don't worry, but I certainly don't worry to the extent that I used to. And without realizing what I did, and now I know what it is, once I studied psychology, was what we call the worry tree,
Mm,
the worry tree technique. And the worry tree technique is to divide worries between, first awareness that you're worrying, to classify your worry between, is this an hypothetical worry or is it a realistic worry?
mm,
Because you deal with them in different ways. As I said, if it's a realistic worry, then it's about thinking, is this, is there something I can do about this worry right now? And if yes, go and do it, which is problem solving. You will problem solve that worry. Let's say, I don't have a car at the moment, but if I had the car and the tire is flat, then I have a problem. I need to go and sort it out. If it's happening now, but you can't resolve it, then think about when you can resolve it, and then let go of worry, because that worry doesn't do anything for you apart from causing lots of anxiety. So drop, what we say is drop the worry. And then resolve it when you can. So let's say that I'm going to work, I can't do anything about the car now, but I can do something when I leave work. So that's realistic worries. If you're thinking about, okay, is this a realistic worry? Is this a hypothetical worry? And actually, it is a hypothetical worry. So I am worrying that my tire is going to go flat. It's not flat. There's no sign that it will go,
yeah.
there's that problem, but I'm worrying about it. So this is a hypothetical worry. There's nothing you can do about it now. So you have to learn to drop that worry. And this is easier said than done because
Exactly, because I was going to say that now.
yeah. Yeah, it's because it worries, worry to that extent is a coping mechanism. So you've
Mm,
learned to cope in that way. And so dropping the worry is going to be really difficult. So it's the practice. You are aware, you have a tendency to do this. Think about whether this is a hypothetical or realistic worry. If it's a realistic, problem solve when you can. It's hypothetical, drop the worry. And one thing that might help is put your focus somewhere else. Go and do something else. The reality is that because it's a habit, you're going to have to try and do this many times over before it becomes second nature to you.
mm.
So it's a practice, and it's because you're trying to break a habit.
Yeah. I'd love to know, do you think in terms of this, self-worth, self-acceptance, when we bring a man and a woman, do you think men and women experience self-worth and self-acceptance differently?
Um, I haven't seen much difference in my practice. Both women and men can have those processes of worry, rumination. Um, I guess maybe sometimes for some, and I'm really generalizing here a little bit, but for some men, it could be about masculinity, not falling short of what being a man is supposed to be. That's, that perhaps their experiences have given them that sense that, this is what you're supposed to be a man,
Yeah.
and you're falling short. And so, men can have issues because they've been given a sense of they don't meet the criteria. And maybe women can be the same, can have those, self-esteem that comes from that. You're not, whatever it might be, you're not pretty, you're not beautiful, you don't have a particular shape.
Mm.
That but even in that, there's a parallel, isn't it? So um in my practice, I have not seen a difference particularly. I guess sometimes men can act out more, and women can internalize. But
Mm.
I've seen the same, in both
Mm. That's
genders.
that's actually very lovely. And let's look at it from a career perspective right now. How do you think a strong sense of self, you've got that self-worth, how do you think it actually affects a woman's career and leadership journey?
um Many ways, and I don't think we have time for me to speak about all the ways, so I'm just going to focus on one aspect of it, which is making decisions not because this is what you want or it comes from your values, but because of what you think other people want. So with low self-esteem and low self-worth, one of the things that can come quite often is preoccupation with what other people think, and doing things to prove yourself to other people. And even though we can't completely eliminate that from our experience, we are social beings, and so other people are going to be important. When we do things mainly because of what other our parents want or society expects from us, we may not be doing the thing that it's the right thing
The
for
right
us.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, that comes from our values, that comes from what we think we would like to do, that we take pleasure in, that we enjoy, that gives us a sense of mastery. Um, I mean, you could do something because it's something that your parent thinks you should do. So, I work with, people from all cultural backgrounds, but one of the things that I've noticed, for example, with Asian, like Indian, clients, is there's a lot of parental expectations in terms of what they choose as a profession. And there are people that will then follow that career, but it's not what they really wanted. Potentially
Mm.
they wanted something else. But because of that pressure, they will follow a particular path that sometimes really doesn't align with their strengths.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is people will come into therapy with different lots of issues, including a sense of not feeling fulfilled.
Mm. For our viewers who are, currently watching us right now, um, some people are in that phase in their life, just like you said, your parents wanting you to do something, and probably that's not where you're deriving your own fulfillment from. How do you manage that expectation?
From the parents.
Yeah, from the parents.
I guess, I mean, parents are probably doing that because they want the best for you, isn't it? They think
Mm.
that that's the best option. And what I'm going to say may not be, it's one way, but definitely, kind of helping your parents understand that, communicating what it is that you want and why, and explaining, if they don't know that this particular career is a good career or it's because you like it. So
Yeah.
there's that. But I'm as I'm saying this, I'm really aware that that puts the sort of pressure on the person, and rather than the parent.
Yeah.
And maybe people do that, and the parent still, may not
Don't
understand.
listen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's quite tricky, isn't it? And whether, maybe support from school or universities, where there's a whoever the teacher or the tutor may have to explain. So if the person doesn't feel confident that they can put those ideas across to their parents. So yeah, I think it's a tricky thing, to kind of advise on, I would say, Juliet.
Yeah.
um
You've talked about self-worth and low self-esteem. Are they two separate things, or they're, intertwined?
I mean, from my perspective, I mean, you could get quite academic with this, but from my perspective, they're one and the same. I mean, when people come to see me, they could use either
Mm.
term, and this is where I'm coming from. It's what people say this is, it's what it is from my perspective. And so if they use one term versus the other, I mean, what I would do as a therapist is to find out, what do they mean? What does that mean for them? How does it impact their lives? What changes do they want to make? So I will take I will take the lead from the client
Yeah, that,
in that
that that's actually
respect.
very interesting, because prior to this time, I always get confused when I hear self-worth,
Mm,
self-esteem. I did two different things, but I think that's, a very good clarification. I'd love to know, oftentimes as women, we rely so much on external validation. You know, we don't think, for some of us out there, we don't think we're beautiful enough until someone tells us you're beautiful. We don't think we look good enough until someone says that to us. And I'll use myself as an instance. Growing up, I had a family friend say to me, I don't take pictures of ugly people in my phone. Like, he called me ugly. I was probably 7, 8 years old, and I grew up thinking I was a very ugly girl,
mm,
to the extent that I didn't realize that my friends noticed it. When the era of social media came, I'd post pictures of celebrities online. I would never post mine
mm,
because I felt that I was ugly. And so I had someone message me one day, and he's like, why don't you ever post pictures of yourself? And I said to him, because I'm ugly. I don't think I'm beautiful enough to put my picture out there. Now we have people, it was after then he said that to me. He was like, you're very beautiful. Just know that, it just gave me that sense of relief. Like, yeah, someone said I'm beautiful. So I started posting pictures little by little. Now we have people out there who rely so much on external validation to feel good. How do you think we could, get deeply rooted in ourselves? Like, we know that I'm beautiful, regardless of what
mm,
anybody out there has to
mm,
say about me. Like, you have that strong conviction within you that you are worthy, you are lovable, you are valuable. Like, you don't need external validation to feel good.
mm, mm. I really think that it's a journey, Juliet. I don't think that it's something that easy to achieve, because of all of these messages that we get from such an early age that have such an impact on us, immediately in that moment, but also in terms of how our brain then operates in relation to that particular topic. So for example, if you hear feedback like that, one of the things that our brains are going to do is to look for something similar, to protect yourself, for example. But in the process of doing that, what doesn't happen is we don't pay attention to other feedback that doesn't confirm that. So it's really the impact, it makes us biased towards paying attention to negative information, and then neglecting anything that other people are saying, that you might be thinking, some of your positive experiences that say otherwise. So that's one aspect of how this, that experience is so difficult. And so the process of sort of undoing that is complicated. So again, therapy may be really helpful in that, because a therapist is not someone who's in your environment. So they will be able to sort of work with you from a neutral position. And it's, kind of encourage people to be really curious about themselves, in terms of their thoughts, their behaviors, their feelings, even how, when they're triggered by something, how the body reacts to that. So that awareness, again, I think we always come back to that awareness, whether you are in therapy or not, is, kind of really important in terms of how has this impacted me.
So that's self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yeah, is really important. And then um I don't think that there is one particular, kind of response. There's many ways you could go about this. But one way, and I think a client of mine was saying yesterday that this is coming up a lot on Instagram, which is, what would you say to your younger self?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't go to Instagram much, and I don't follow other therapists, so I haven't seen that, but it is part of the work that we do. What would you say to that, little Juliet? What would you say to her, that now she didn't know then? And one way that we do in therapy, for example, we use imagery as part of our work. And so it could be that you imagine yourself um, sitting beside your little one, little Juliet, and you tell her, you know, that what she's experienced, what she heard, is someone's opinion. But there's so many, other things, so many other things about her that are amazing and great and positive, that, because of that experience, she hasn't been aware of. And so in that imagery, you can tell her about, how beautiful she is. You can tell her about how, how amazing she is, and how, because of her, this is who you are today. It's what she suffered, and what she, the qualities and the strengths that she's had, and that she, the resilience, that you are who you are today, and that you're still here. So imagery is really potent, and is one way. But there's many other ways, I guess, kind of practices where you center yourself in your, center yourself, align yourself with your core, and get a sense of, this is me, and this is where, within me, I feel safe, and I feel centered, and I feel calm. And you can get to that, I think it's such a personal experience. It could be through meditation, it could be through exercise, so walking, whatever, you enjoy. It could be just sitting there and being with yourself, and finding that core, and spending time with that part of yourself. Maybe it sounds a little bit vague, and I can explain more if necessary, but I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
sense,
it makes a lot of
Juliet.
sense,
Yeah.
honestly, because I'm just like reflecting and pondering on what you were just saying. And when you talked about self-awareness, for instance, a lot of us, I'm using us like to generalize it. So a lot of us, we're not really self-aware. It's one thing to talk about awareness, but
Mm,
I remember one time someone asked me, "What are your strengths?" And I was like, "I don't know what my strengths are.
yeah.
I struggle to find my strengths, but I could point out my weaknesses for you." So how do we get to that point of self-awareness? Are there steps that we need to take to become more self-aware?
Yeah. I think it's complicated, because it really is an individual experience, and some people are more self-aware than others. So they're more aware of. I mean, I don't know. I mean, eh, and I'm not. What I'm going to say, I'm not sure if it's going to make justice. Which is, we talk about emotional intelligence. So there's
Mhm.
different types of intelligence, and emotional intelligence is one type, and some people are more emotionally intelligent than others. And from my experience, people who are more emotionally intelligent tend to be more self-aware. And so, but this is something that is probably part of your temperament. So, it's what we're born with. And so we don't have a hand in choosing those things. Um, but I think if you are interested, then in I would like to be more self-aware. Then it's definitely thinking about what that experience could be like. Is it starting with being self-aware of your emotions, and then labeling them? Is it being self-aware of your behaviors, your preferences? So I guess self-awareness, there's something about stepping back from your experience, isn't it?
Mm.
It's about not just experiencing something, but also stepping back and reflecting on that. So what could it be? Oh, I don't know. It could be something like, okay, I'm angry. I'm really angry now. And then, kind of the self awareness is stepping back and noticing, okay, I'm really angry. What am I angry about? What triggered me? And what's happened next? How is that experiencing in experiencing that in my body? So there's a process of stepping back, isn't it? There's a process of, and then there's a process of commitment, to think about these things, to make space and time to, I don't know, I've had a busy day, for example, but at some point in the day, I am going to reflect on this. So stepping back, having a commitment, making time for it, and facing, difficult, facing what's difficult about us and not feeling scared of that. Being a human being is not about perfection. Nobody is ever going to be perfect. And so that, I talk about self acceptance, and self acceptance is about becoming aware of ourselves, not only of, the bad things, but also the good things, and vice versa, not only the good things, but also the bad, the less good things,
Mm.
and not seeing that as a sign that there's something wrong with you, that you're less than anybody else, but seeing that as a sign that you are a human being. So the courage to face, the things that are difficult about us.
Challenges.
Yeah.
Okay. And you touched a bit on emotional intelligence. Can you please shed more light on emotional
Emotional
intelligence?
intelligence. Yeah. Um, Emotional intelligence is source, is understanding emotions, understanding yourself, understanding other people. And you don't have, and we are very complex. So, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. But having an understanding, having awareness, being interested in exploring these things. And so if you have an experience of something, and it brings feelings to you, emotions, thoughts, becoming aware of that, and sort of having the courage to face it, to think about it, to understand more about it, can be part of emotional intelligence. So it is a complicated, kind of thing. And some people, from my observation, tend to be uh, very emotional intelligent. So there's a lot of my clients are very emotional intelligent, and so
Mm.
the work in therapy can be, easier, because they are aware of their emotions. For example, they can label them. They are aware of their thoughts. They may not be aware of their strengths and limitations as much as they want to,
Yeah.
but they're open to exploring that and make time. So yes, it's something that you can maybe have a tendency to be good at, but it doesn't mean that you're, in the scale of 0, where you don't have any emotional intelligence, and 100, you're 100% emotional. It's probably a journey, isn't it? And we can all, it's the same as other types of intelligence, where you, by doing certain things like reflecting, studying, making a commitment to learning more, you
We
can
can develop.
develop. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I came across a 2017 study by Ulrich Ott. I'm sorry if I've pronounced your name wrongly, but Ulrich Ort and Richard Robbins that found that people with high self esteem tend to experience greater success in relationships, their career, and health over time. Do you see this reflected in the women you've worked with so far?
Um, I mean, I tend to work with people that struggle with their, liking themselves. And that doesn't necessarily make them completely like unsuccessful. Some people with self-esteem issues can be extremely successful in their
Mm-hmm.
career, for example. And it's there's a driver because they don't feel so good about themselves. um Achieving is one way of feeling, kind of
Yeah,
positive about yourself. And in fact, I was working with someone today. We were having that exact conversation. This person is highly accomplished in their job. They're incredibly intelligent, academically. But what we were reflecting on today is it never feels enough. So once he achieves something, what's the next thing? Because this person was talking about feeling empty when he achieves something, and never really giving himself a pat in the back, or
accolade.
acknowledgement, and say, I'm really happy with what I've achieved. It's always okay, a feeling of emptiness, and then what's the next thing? So people can, be really successful in things like jobs, but it's that sense of I am good enough, and maybe I failed at this, but that doesn't mean I'm not worthy, and I can't be successful. Um, but it does make sense, doesn't it, that if you have a good sense of yourself, you don't have to deal with certain things to the same extent as people who struggle with their sense of self. So things like anxiety, things like low mood and depression, in other words, mental health difficulties. So you can focus more, can't you,
Yeah.
on the task at hand. You can, because you have a more balanced view of yourself when you have good self-esteem and good self-worth, and good, confidence. So your attention isn't hijacked by, for example, worry, chronic worry, anxiety, unnecessary anxiety. um, and so you can focus more on, the things that are important to you.
Yeah, that matters.
Yeah, does that, answer?
Yeah, that makes sense. While you were talking, you made mention of people not liking themselves. And I used to see myself like that before. Like, I actually didn't love myself enough, but I was willing to give that love to someone out there. Now, why do you think this is happening? Why do you think we're willing to like pour into cups that, you know, we're willing to give love to people, but we're not willing to give that love to
To
ourselves?
ourselves. I mean, which brings me to the topic of self-compassion. A lot, self-acceptance is one part of it in working with people with low self-esteem and low self-worth, low confidence. But the other part is self-compassion. So I would say that, um, possibly all my clients, yeah, all my clients have a lot of compassion for other people. They are very accepting of other people's, kind of shortcomings, but they are not accepting of their own shortcomings. And so there's a lack of compassion. And so part of the work is developing self compassion. And self compassion is not about self pity, it's not about, making excuses, for yourself. It's about seeing yourself as a human being like everybody else, that you, like everybody else, have, kind of challenges,
Your flaws.
flaws, and accepting those, but also, accepting that there is suffering in life, but not but that you can do something about that suffering. So in, kind of taking steps to address the suffering. So for example, if the suffering is to do with overthinking in terms of worry and rumination, is making the commitment to address those processes. So it's doing something about the suffering. And so it's really turning the spotlight of compassion to yourself, and practicing. So there's a lot of information out there about self-compassion these days.
Yeah.
If you Google, you'll find something, and it's not going to happen from one day to the next. It is a practice. It can feel really difficult at the beginning to turn that spotlight into yourself. And direct the self-compassion. You don't have to stop being self-compassionate to others, but direct some of that into
Love to
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. That's actually very interesting because it's while you were talking, it was something that I could relate to in
Yeah.
the past. Like, it was a struggle for me. I was very self-critical. I judge myself, if things doesn't go as I want, I say a lot of hurtful stuff to myself. And I think there are quite a number of women out there who struggle with things like this. And for some of us at the time, we probably didn't have a non-judgmental shoulder to talk about this with. But I'm actually glad, with what you said is actually very enlightening and
Mm-hmm.
encouraging. And like Dr. Gisela said, there are lots of books out there that you could explore to get further information. And if you would also need to get more information about her, maybe you want to go for therapy as well, I'm gonna drop her details on the description box. Now back to you, Dr. Giselle. Another question I would love to, get your insight about is a lot of women out there, they underprice themselves. They feel like because they're not able to recognize their worth, they feel like they're not capable, they're not competent enough,
Mm.
and maybe they go for a job that they're very qualified for, they underprice themselves. Now, what's the link between having that sense of self and financial empowerment?
Mm. I mean, there's many ways, this can play out. One way is, because women may not feel confident, may not, as you
Mm,
say, aware of their worth, may not go for opportunities that actually they're really, really good,
qualified for.
qualified, and could go for something that's, kind of
Below them.
below their experience, their qualifications. So there's avoidance is one way that this can impact women. It can take a long time as well sometimes, because the women may not have the confidence, and so um it will take them longer to get to somewhere, for example. That someone who has better self-worth and more confidence can get to a bit quicker, because they're self-reassured. They know that they can handle kind of stresses
Whatever
and
pressure.
challenges. Yeah, and because someone who doesn't feel like that may really really underplay their strengths, may they have to deal with emotional distress, and all of that can impact kind of the your journey, in terms of the opportunities that you go for, but also in terms of the time that it could get to that you could take to get there.
Yeah.
So these are just a couple of examples. Juliet, and kind of the issue, mental health problems becoming a bit prevalent, and the person having to deal with that can also interfere with the journey. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. Of course, we would prefer people to not have mental health issues,
Yeah.
but if you do and you need to address them, of course, go for it. But it could, yeah, that the time that you get to for someone to get to where they want to get to, could be longer and more difficult. For example, I don't know if that
That makes a
answers.
lot of sense
Yeah,
because
your.
there could be a young woman out there right now who is struggling. She has that self doubt. Maybe there are quite a number of opportunities around and she feels she's not competent enough. And I think
Mm,
imposter syndrome actually contributes to that as well. So,
such a strong, yeah, such a common
yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that I found that like very enlightening. There's a young woman out there now who is watching you and she's struggling with low self-worth. She's struggling with self-acceptance. Maybe she doesn't like the skin she's in. She feels she's not, there's nothing good about her. What's that one tip you could give to that young woman out there who's currently listening to us that would enable her embrace that journey of, self-acceptance and self-worth, and would help her achieve her full potential, especially with her career as well?
Mm. I would say, I mean, the first thing I would say is it is possible. Okay, so a message of hope that it is possible to feel better, about yourself. It does take work, but this work, whether you do it with a therapist or you do it by yourself, or there's many ways to get into this journey and get to where you want to get to. Um, that it is possible. And then, I mean, there's just so many different ways, whether it's therapy, whether it's your own journey that you decide to go for. It could be things like, what are the activities that you enjoy and give you a sense of self? What are the practices that you can do, in everyday life, or, as part of your, kind of everyday, whether it's once a week, or that where you can self-reflect on, what's going on for you. What would you like to do next? What do you want to address?
Yeah.
Whether it's, being around people that inspire you and, give you strength and courage and motivation, that bring you balance. So, people that fill your cup,
Yeah.
is another way. I think it's also about seeing it as a process and as a journey, and so that it's not something that you can achieve from one day to the next. And so not giving up is really important. So if you see this as a journey, and I don't think that no anyone has 100% self-worth and self-esteem, and self-worth, self-esteem and confidence fluctuates anyway,
Mm.
throughout life, throughout the week, the years, and so on. And so, thinking about what brings you balance, what are the things that are important in your life? What's your values? Being clarifying things like that. Because if you are clear on your values, for example, and you live your life as close to your values as possible, that tends to, make people feel good about themselves
Yeah.
and, gives them a sense of purpose. And so, coming back to that point that this is a journey, it takes time, it takes work. If you are committed and you have the courage and you have the motivation, you can go from, feeling that your self esteem is in a place that you don't like, to a
Yeah.
place where
Yeah.
you feel more confident, you feel more at ease, you feel more at peace with yourself, you feel more balanced. And, there's a sense that I like who I am, I'm not perfect,
Yeah.
but
Embracing yourself.
embrace yourself. Yeah, I guess there's different ways of going back this journey.
Yeah.
Juliet, I don't know if there's anything there that, kind of you want me to explain a bit more.
I think that's fantastic, honestly. And I want to say thank you so much because I've learned a lot within that short period we've spent together. And I'm sure our viewers out there, you've also learned a lot as well. So if you've got any questions for Dr. Gisele, please drop that in the comment section. And I've also learned another thing when you talked about the hypothetical and realistic worry.
Worry.
So you have to find the balance, figure out what type you are actually going through. So once again, please and please give us a like, a follow, a share, and finally subscribe. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And really
Juliet.
lovely to have you again, Dr.
Thank you,
Gisele.
Juliet.
Thank
It
you.
was really helpful. I hope it's helpful for
It is.
your
I love it. Thank you.
listeners.